Good afternoon. It's so fun to see all these great faces. I know this is going to be a really fun event. It's really nice to see James. We haven't seen him in a long time, so thrilled. And all the Valley people, thank you for coming. We are thrilled as a store because Miriam is not only part of our community, but part of our family. And we have been watching this journey. If I cry, just ignore me. We've been watching the journey the whole way through and reading and sharing and cheering you on. And we're excited for you to bring the story to everyone. So congratulations to you. As a store, we're really proud, and as a friend, I'm enormously impressed by you. Naomi is going to be in conversation with Miriam today, and we're going to have a really rich, beautiful discussion about these wonderful characters. And Naomi has a special place in my heart because she taught my youngest ballet. And so I have a love for her, and I have a love for Miriam. So you're all going to have a great event. Thank you both very much. Thank you.
All right, welcome everyone. Look at this beautiful turnout. And I think it's so fitting that there's so much love in this room. This book has been such a labor of love for Miriam. And so all of your great energy and all of your love here today is the perfect way to launch it. I'm Naomi Glass. Miriam and I share a lot of circles that a lot of you share as well. We both have been in Ballet World our whole lives. We are colleagues together at the Northwest Ballet. We are Mercer Islanders, like many of you, and we are moms of many kids. Some of whom are in the Nutcracker this year. And we're friends. And I'll confess that the first time Miriam asked me to do this, I said no. Because I know how much this means to her, and I just want it to be perfect. And I felt like a most special person from the book world would make it perfect. But I think it's also fitting that we're talking today because a major theme in this book is friendship. And so what we'll share today is just a chat between two good friends. And I'd like to ask you to notice what I'm not asking and save your questions because we'll have time at the end. We'd love for you to pick Miriam's brain a little more. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Miriam Landis. I know most of you have a connection with her, but I'll share a little bit about her background. So Miriam has been dancing since she was little. She started dancing in some small schools. I actually didn't know that till this morning when I asked her about it. And at the age of 12, she started training at the Ballet West Conservatory. She moved to New York City as a teenager, where she trained at School of American Ballet, a very prestigious school, and she had her performing career at Miami City Ballet. After that, she moved to the West Coast and got her undergrad at Stanford. And then she moved back to the East Coast to New York City, where she worked as a book editor for some of the major publishing houses. And then she moved back to the West Coast to Seattle, to Amazon, where she was on the books team. And then she found her way back to the ballet world and has been a faculty member at the Pacific Northwest Ballet for the last 12 years. And all along that time, she's been writing and has published 2 books. This is her 3rd, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So that's her professional background. And for those of you who know her personally, you know that Miriam's greatest joy is her family. She is an absolute rock star of a mama to 4 kids, all of whom are around here somewhere. The talking started. And always behind her and by her side is the most stellar husband, Daniel.
The videographer.
You're lucky enough to be Miriam's friend. You know that Miriam has the biggest heart, and she has a ton of grit, and she shows up really herself to everywhere she goes. And I think that's the most admirable trait. And those traits shine through everything she does, whether it's writing or teaching ballet. So I'm really happy to be here to talk with her today. So I have a lot of questions for you, Miriam, but I want to ask you to please start by sharing with us a little excerpt. So if you would please read for us a little bit.
I'm so touched by everything you said here. I could roast her for hours too, so that'll be when her book comes out. Okay, so for those of you that don't know anything about the book, it's about 3 12-year-old kids and the year that they go on point. And the book is told from each of their points of view, so it alternates between these 3 kids. Yes, you can guess the first one you meet is Lauren, and so I was just going to read a little bit of an excerpt of her at home that will give you kind of a flavor of who she is. The music to Alice in Wonderland began to haunt me in math class when I rode my bike, walked the dog, and especially when I was in bed trying to fall asleep. I constantly rehearsed in my mind, spending hours thinking through a particular step or arm gesture. A little ballet obsessed, aren't we? Josh said to me one night, smirking in my doorway before bedtime. He caught me practicing a développé à la seconde on point. Get out of here, I said, slamming the door in his face. It's a waste of your time, he said. I returned to work, standing in front of the mirror with my right leg raised to the side. I was pleased that I could now get my leg higher than my shoulder and aim to strengthen my supporting side and not hold the position by gripping my quads. Ms. Evangeline wanted me to lift the leg from underneath, rotating the heel forward and keeping my right hip down. We've been focusing on proper alignment in class, which made it even harder to get my leg up high. No cheating, Ms. Evangeline said. That was one thing I learned this year. There were no shortcuts.
So you mentioned that this book is written from the perspective of 3 different characters. Could you share with us just a little bit about each character and kind of your intention behind them and a little bit of the journey that we see with each of them throughout the book?
Sure. So first of all, this is fiction, so these are not kids I know. But over my lifetime, I have known many, many, many dancers. And I don't want to stereotype dancers because I think that that's a problem in literature and movies that we see as a lot of stereotypical dancers. But I did try to sort of tease out some of the different journeys that I've seen in people that I know and challenges they face. So Lauren, who is the main character, starts out as kind of, she's the best kid in her local school in Mercer Island. And it's all kind of easy for her. But she does not have parents who can really financially support her. They're sort of discouraging of her interest in ballet. And she just kind of does it without thinking, which as many parents know a lot of kids do because they need to be doing things. And it is not until our second character, Serena, arrives from the East Coast, who walks into ballet class one day and is a lot better than Lauren, that Lauren goes, wait a second, maybe this isn't all as easy as I thought it was going to be. So Lauren's kind of her character arc is coming to understand what being good at ballet really means. That it means working hard and persisting and not just taking everything for granted that comes easy to you. So that's Lauren. Then we have Serena, who has come from the East Coast. And Serena, her brother has died in a car accident. And her mother was a famous ballet dancer herself, and is trying to live out a lot of her issues through her child. And Serena's really questioning if she's doing ballet for herself or for her mom. And then we have a character who was probably the hardest for me to write, the one I was most scared of writing, and that is Brian. Brian is a black boy who wants to dance on point. And this was a character that I felt was very important to include in this book. But I also know that especially in today's publishing climate, it's very challenging to write a character that is not you. So it was very important to me that I got this character right. And I spent a lot of time working on getting this character right. And many people may feel that this character is based on Ashton Edwards, who is a black dancer at PNB who dances on point, but it is truly not. I really saw Brian as representing what it means to be true to yourself, no matter how the outside world sees you. And predictably, his father is not so thrilled about his choices. But then you also have a ballet teacher who supports these kids and sort of helps them find their way, whether it's in ballet or not. And each of them by the end has kind of come to realize what ballet means to them, what role it should play in their life, but also who they are, and sort of what it means to grow up and learn to, that maybe adults aren't always right. They do see a lot of adults making mistakes, and they can recognize what they should and should not be doing. I really thought a lot about my students who I teach when I wrote about these kids, and also my own kids, because my 4 kids all go to Pacific Northwest Ballet School, and we're trying to figure out where ballet fits in their lives. And the other thing about these characters is that one of the primary reasons I wrote the book is that I really wanted kids this age, like my students, to feel seen. And I know as a kid, there was very few ballet books on the shelf, or I don't want to call it a ballet book, but books that reflected me. And so I really felt like I had to get this book out there for my students and for the little me, the little us, right? That is trying to figure out why we're so passionate about something and what role does it play in our life. And so each of these kids, I hope, will lead to a larger conversation about kids in ballet today, because it's really important to me that they have a good experience, that our world becomes more inclusive, and I hope the characters kind of touch people's hearts and help them be more empathetic and supportive to these kids. It's a really hard age. So that's kind of the 3 kids in the book.
Super. So I remember reading a draft of this when it was only from Lauren's perspective. So for me, it was really cool to see you morph it into coming from 3 different perspectives. Was one of those particularly fun for you, or particularly challenging, or how was it different to take this storyline that you have already developed and then to look at it in different ways with different lenses?
So that's a great question, because Naomi really has watched the process of this book. This book took a long time. And the early drafts of it were all in Lauren's viewpoint, which was probably the easiest one for me to write. Lauren is not me, but that was sort of my world, more of my worldview. And then I had some very wise editorial advice that I should rewrite it from the 3 different kids. Actually, I was told I should write it from 4 different kids, and I haven't, at that point, I was like, I can't anymore. But I did really enjoy writing Serena, because I was not the kid that ballet came easily to. Things always look different when you see the finished product. But I was always more the Lauren in the back who was saying, I gotta be better because there are better people. And so to see sort of how, and Serena's very sophisticated and knowledgeable about dance in a way that Lauren is not, because her mother was in this world. And also Serena had suffered a real loss in her family. So I found that character very interesting to kind of get into her head. And also, it's very easy for me to see why Lauren loves ballet and wants to continue in ballet. Thinking about why a kid would pull away from dance is also just thought-provoking. I mean, I think it's different for every person. So I enjoy that. Brian I loved. But again, I felt very like, okay, I'm going to get criticized for this book. I'm going to get criticized for even approaching this character. But I just really loved that character. And the more, at several writers' conferences, I had discussions with other writers about, can you write this? Can you talk in this way? And my feeling was, well, maybe not, but if I don't write it, nobody's going to write it, especially in this world, in this situation. And I also wanted it to reflect what I see in the ballet world today. And these are the kind of kids I see. And so they belong at the table. And hopefully I did an okay job getting Brian to the table, but I adored him. I mean, to me, any kid that loves to dance is an automatic, I love them. So this is a kid who really wanted to dance, and so he had to be there. So, yeah.
Awesome. So one thing I enjoyed about your book is that there are a lot of undercurrents, and you touched upon some of them. There's also a lot of, you talked about parents making mistakes. There's also a lot of family dynamics that are revealed throughout the course of the book, between parent-child, parental expectations, parent-to-parent, siblings, and can you talk about, I understand why the book was important for this middle grade age where there just aren't a lot of books about ballet for that age group. Can you talk about why it was so important to also incorporate those dynamics into the story?
Yes, so I think that no dancer happens without their parents. I mean, no grown-up happens without their parents. But I do think, especially watching many dancers develop, I mean, when we were younger, we knew the dancers were so talented, and then it just didn't follow through, right? And I think the family dynamics play a huge role in how a kid moves forward in their life. And the more I wrote about these characters, the more none of their choices made any sense without their immediate family around them and what was going on with them. And also, not only that, but one thing I really wanted to show was how important their friendship is, because at that age, kids begin to pull away from their family and lean into their friends in a really kind of intense way. And they need different things from their friends. And also, a lot of what happens to these kids happens because of the dynamics between their parents. And sort of the climactic moment is kind of a parental crisis more than a kid crisis. So my hope with the book was not only that it would be for middle grade readers, but that parents would read it and it would make them think a little harder about how as we watch all of our kids do whatever activity that they're doing and we try to support them through it, that our behavior really matters, and they do see it, and kids are smart. They know when we make bad choices or good choices, and I'm sure I made plenty, but I just felt like I wanted these kids to feel seen. I wanted us to see them. I wanted, when they read this book, for them to see themselves, and the quiet things are sometimes the most important things. So I don't know if that makes sense.
So your previous two books were for older people, and I'm curious about the process of writing for a younger audience and what that was like for you.
So the older books kind of have a long backstory to them. They were started in my early 20s when I left ballet, and I went to college, and I actually have some college friends who I see in the audience who were there during the early drafts, which is pretty cool. Hi, Elizabeth. And Julie. So I think they originally started as a bit of a form of therapy. I think a lot of writers write as therapy, and I was really trying to process who I was if I wasn't a dancer. So at the time, I didn't think of them as young adult books. I didn't think of them as writing for kids. I was writing for myself. And those books do chronicle sort of the later teen years and then the early years in the company. But this book really began because I realized that my books didn't encompass this big age, this going on point age, which the longer I teach, the more you see is a huge age. But also, I mean, my twins are 11, so we're getting there. And so I think about them a lot, and now I think about them in the context of dance, and I don't know, it wasn't written because I wanted to write for middle grade readers, just like the other books weren't written because, I want to be a YA author, or I want to be a middle grade author. They were written for very specific people in my life who matter to me, and types of people in my life who matter to me, and who I feel like it's sort of my obligation to support after everything I've been through. Like, we're both kind of at the age where we look around and there aren't that many dancers that are still in it, and like, if we don't watch out for the next generation, who's gonna? So yeah, I guess that answers it. I wouldn't say, I'm a middle grade author, I'm a young adult author. Like, I was writing just very specific people, so.
So you talk about going on point. What does that mean for people who haven't experienced that themselves? What is that in a young dancer's life?
Well, the little Jewish girl in me always compares this to your bar mitzvah. But going on point is a big coming of age thing for kids. I think it's almost fetishized from a young age for girls, that this is like the thing where you're a real ballerina, you're a real dancer. It's also like an external thing that you are given, you are awarded. Like, you don't get a trophy like in sports, you get your point shoes. But for a kid that age, it's a really, really big deal. And so for girls, I think it means you're a young woman, you're a ballerina, your teachers think you have done the work and are ready. It's a way of the outside world giving you permission to be this thing you want to be. For boys, it's very different, obviously, and it's a newer thing. In the past, Dancing on Point has been caricatured. It's been put in the Ballet Trocaderos, which is a company that is very specific to men dancing on point. But now we're in kind of a different era where kids are really learning to say, this is what I want to do, this is who I am. Gender norms be gone. Like, I don't need to meet somebody's expectations of me. I can be who I am. And we're seeing more and more that there are people who this is a real journey for them. And so I think for the character of Brian, it really symbolizes him being himself. And, you see his dad saying no, and his teacher plays a very important role in his life, which is, again, something that I'm very conscious of because I feel like some of the most influential people in my young life were my ballet teachers. And the teacher in the book is the one who says, here are your shoes, and I will talk to your parents. And I think it just symbolizes something very, very different for somebody who isn't expected to go on point, that they actively decide it isn't conferred on them, that they go out and say, this is who I am. It's a prism and a symbol for a coming of age for kids that age. And so I think it's a really good metaphor. Whether it's dance or whatever, it's something at that age where you are arriving.
So you touched in there a little bit about norms changing. I think another theme in your book is fitting in or inclusion, or the flip side of that, not fitting in, not belonging. How do you see that theme related to the bigger context of the dance world?
Okay, so good. This is actually, I've been making Naomi talk about this a lot because so much of her life's work now is that Naomi runs the IDEA committee at PNB and also the Dance Chance program. So a lot of programs that welcome in people that traditionally feel excluded from the dance world. But I do think that we're at a different time now where, especially after COVID, where the arts really were sidelined. We're really not at the forefront of anybody's concern that if we are now an art form that excludes people, we will be more and more marginalized. I think it's a huge mistake. And I feel like, fiction is a really good way to empathize and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And a lot with ballet, I feel like, is just not understood. That art form just is not understood, and that one of the ways that we understand things is through other people's experiences. If we connect with individuals, which is probably one of the reasons I felt very obligated to get loud about this, because if we can talk about these kids and we can talk about young dancers and the struggles that they face, and that we make room for all kinds of people who want to dance, that whatever role dance plays in anyone's life, and for most people it will not be as a professional in a professional company, and that is totally okay. I've actually found that my life is a lot happier when ballet plays a certain area of my life. It doesn't encompass my whole life, and I think that it could bring joy to a lot of people if they were exposed to it in a way that didn't make them feel excluded. So that's a lot of my hope with the book, is that it will start to open a conversation about art as an inclusive act, not an exclusive.
Great. Another theme throughout your book is perseverance and hard work. It's just integral to ballet, right? It's what ballet dancers do. They work hard. So I'm wondering about that in terms of your writing. So to me, this book is like perseverance and grit tangible. If you're driving across the I-90 bridge and it's like dark and rainy and cold and you see someone running, that to me is like perseverance in motion. And I kind of think about your writing similarly, because like no one is chasing them and no one was chasing you to do this. So you had to propel yourself and you had to find that internal drive. differently than if you're showing up to work and there are expectations of you. There were no expectations, and you know, that's happened over the course of a long time and a lot of work. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, the book is a symbol for a lot of things in my life, but first of all, for those of you that don't know, in order to get this book out in the world, I had to found my own publishing house and publish it myself. And that is after many, many years of rejection. Like, I'm 45 now. I've been trying to publish books since I was in my early 20s. My first two books, I mean, my books are a story in and of themselves, but my first two books, I did have a big agent in New York who tried to sell them to the big publishing houses, and we kept hearing, ballet is too niche. You know, this is 20 years ago. I mean, it was right when Twilight was big, so there were no vampires in the books. So that Daniel keeps telling me to put vampires in my books. I'm like, I'm not interested in vampires. But so those books, you know, went on sale to those publishing houses for a year, and we got a bunch of no's. At which point I moved to Seattle and I put them in a drawer, and I just said, I guess I'm not a writer. Now I'm like, oh, I was really young, I didn't know what I was doing, but at the time I was, you know. And then when I got married, Daniel pulled those books out of a drawer, and it was when I worked at Amazon, and he said, it was right when Create Space came out, which was the self-publishing platform. And I was at Amazon, and we just said, okay, well, let's publish them. So we did, and we did a real hack job. We didn't design them, we didn't edit them, we didn't, like, we slapped the covers together at home, and I put them on Facebook, because there was really no social media at that time. And they've sold over 10,000 copies. Wow. Which is more than a lot of traditionally published books, which is shocking to me. I mean, to this day, and now, anyway. But, so anyway, at that point I was like, and it was embarrassing to be self-publishing at that time, I'll be very frank. Like, that was a period where I had worked at Simon & Schuster, I had worked at Hyperion, I had spent my days rejecting and rejecting and rejecting. Like, the people who self-published were, you know, looked down on. So that was like a big getting over myself moment with those books. And then after those books came out, I kind of said, okay, I saw them through. I'm having 4 children, I'm teaching, I'm whatever, big creative in many other ways. Well, apparently I wasn't done. And so again, I kept writing. I write adult fiction as well. I heard many no's for those. But this particular book, which I started querying with agents 2 years ago, I just couldn't let go of. And some of it is the illustrations, because I was working with an illustrator who felt very passionate about the book as well, who was a dancer. And you'll see the book had to be published just for her illustrations. Forget this. Right? Yes. Beautiful illustrations. And there's kind of a neat backstory too, in that at one point I flew to Salt Lake City, where we were both from, and we had a friend who has a ballet studio there. And she said, come in, my students will act out the story and we will photograph them. And then the illustrator would have the actual images of these kids. And so we had this amazing day where these kids who were so excited that their story was going to be in a book. And then my illustrator illustrated those pictures. And originally we planned to do a lot more, and it just didn't happen. But and what's really cool is on this book tour, I'm going to be going back to Salt Lake, and the kids that are the original models are going to be appearing with me to talk about the book and what it means to them. And those kids also really helped me write it, as we talked about getting in their heads. You know, you see them in real life, and you're like, well, this is Brian, or this is Serena, and it's just self-evident that the characters jump right off the page. But anyway, I kept querying and hearing no, and it was COVID, a lot of people left the publishing industry. And I started to say, gosh, I've been in ballet for almost 40 years. I've been in publishing for almost 20 years. Like, I think I know what to do. And I had some really wonderful support from students, other writers, friends, family, that just, I felt like I couldn't let it go. And so I started my own publishing house. I hired my own packager. I hired my illustrator. I drove my husband crazy. We made it like a business. I threw myself on social media, which is embarrassing, but I'm getting more used to it. And I published it, and I've seen it through, and I'm my own. I have a real sense of ownership and pride over it. I feel like this was. And the other news is that we are republishing my old books, which will be coming out probably in November. And that was kind of a big journey to go back and look at what I've written in my 20s see how bad it was. Just kidding. But I mean, when I read it, I was like, okay, there is something here. But now it's like taking ballet class. I've been writing and writing and writing and writing for decades. And there is a craft to it, there is a skill to it that I am not the writer I was in my 20s. And I was able to revise them. And I actually have the most amazing cover star, who is Sarah Gabriel Ryan, who's a principal dancer, or soon to be at PNB. And she's beautiful. And so now it helped me visualize these books as not bigger than myself. So I'm very excited for those books to come out as well. And now I feel like I've kind of covered the canon for my kids. I've got the pre-point kids, I've got the teenagers, and I've got the young company members. And those will all be out for the holidays. And it's really feels very good to be connecting with the dance community and beyond, the mom, dad, parents community that we're trying to do right by our kids now. And just to see how excited, especially the young dance students are about to see themselves in a book. So I'm very, very grateful to be here today, and especially with all of you, because many of these people played a huge role in getting me here. Like, nothing like this happens without a community of support, and so I'm just really grateful.
So I know both of those, sharing yourself through writing and sharing yourself through teaching ballet specifically, or previously through dancing, those feed your soul. And I've also heard you say that writing is an act of generosity. And I'm curious about if you find a parallel there. If you talk more about that generous aspect, and if there's a parallel also with dancing.
Yes. So I think basically the way that I see it is that anytime we do an act of creativity or bringing something in the world that doesn't have to be there, that it's a generous act. I think writing is a generous act, dancing, when I teach, it's a giving to other people. And you know, a lot of times I think dancers get a little confused thinking that it's about them, or writers can get confused that it's about them. But the older I get and the more dancing and writing, because I read a ton as well, the more I see the stuff that works is the stuff that connects people, and that doesn't come from taking, it comes from giving. And I get a lot of joy and pleasure. That feeds my soul. Good things, since I have 4 kids and I'm giving to them all the time. But for me, the writing and the dancing and the teaching is all very, very connected. It's why I do it whether I'm going to be published or not, or whether people tell me it's bad or not, or anyone reads the book or not. I do it because it feels good to me, and the reward comes back to me. When I used to dance, my favorite part was just feeling like I was connecting with the audience, and I hope other kids will kind of see that. I try to remind, especially I teach a lot of adults. You can all come take my open class, every single one of you. Come, it's really fun, it's a great community. I don't care if you're bad at all. But you know, I have a lot of adult students who apologize in class. Like, they'll make a mistake, or they'll fall down and be like, I'm sorry, Miriam, I'm sorry. And I was like, please don't apologize. Like, just showing up in the room and doing your art and putting yourself out there in the world, to me, is a gift. Like, when they come to my class, to me, it's a gift that I get to watch them do their art. And I feel that way when I read other authors that I admire. I feel like they've given me a piece of themselves, and to me, it all just feels very connected, and I'm just grateful that I'm able to do it, and that I found ways to do it, you know, not being in a ballet company, or not being published by a big publishing house, or not whatever it is that I am. I just get a lot of joy out of that, and I hope kids learn that they can find a place in it to get joy out of it too, whether it's, you know, they get their point shoes or not.
Yeah, I think you're such a beautiful example. So I want to read an excerpt, and then open it up for questions.
Great. I told her she should read some, because I feel very vulnerable when I read from it, so I thought it would be nice if she could.
So this is a short section. And do you want to preface this moment for us?
Sure. Okay, so this little excerpt it's at the big performance, and it's actually told from Brian's point of view, who is watching his friend, and he's talking about watching his friend perform.
time. That moment Lauren dreamed of all year, when she gets to perform like a real ballerina in a tutu and point shoes under the spotlight. The world went away. It was just Lauren. Her hard work paid off in muscle memory, and her body moved precisely how she trained it. There were no mirrors, teachers, or choreographers offering criticism. So much of who Lauren was and what she wanted came out in her movements. Lifting a leg or a wrist flick could represent a thought or a feeling. She might not have been able to control the events in her everyday life, but Lauren was in charge on stage. To me, she was dazzling. Great to pick your brain and hear your answers. I'd like to open it up to anyone who might have questions.
Have you given any thought, you have a publishing house, and
I
that's
do. I do.
That's amazing.
I do. We have 3 books. Why?
Beyond those 3 books, have you given any thought to what you might do with this thing that you have?
That thing. That's a great question. Whenever I think about it too hard, I get really panicked and I stop. I have had a lot of people in the dance world reach out to me about wanting to write. Nancy Pearl, who was originally going to join me and was not able to, has urged me to repackage and republish old dance books that have not come out or that have sort of fallen out of print. But I think my problem right now is I'm only one person. And I only have so many hours in the day, and I have 4 children, and I have a job, and I have a husband that's a big job. So I guess the answer is I don't know. I know that I want to keep writing. I don't know that I want to keep publishing. I didn't intend to be a publisher. I don't particularly love it. I mean, I know it really well, but it isn't where my joy is. But I love the idea of supporting other writers. It has always been super important to me to support other artists, whether they're dancers, they're writers, and if there are especially people from a dance background who are looking to contribute to dance writing in a way that I feel like helps the future generations, I will support that. But I guess I don't know. If anyone has any ideas, let me know. I'm all for collaborative thinking. But yes, I do have a publishing house. If this book does well, it will be a successful publishing house, and we'll go from there. Thank you. That's a good question. Yeah. Let me know if you have any ideas. Or you want me to publish it. Right? Julie.
So Miriam, I follow you on TikTok.
Oh gosh. Okay.
And you put out the greatest content. And I know when you started writing, TikTok wasn't the thing. Can you talk a little bit about how technology and social media has changed how you're reaching the ballet community and publishing and how they connect?
Okay, so that is an awesome question. I'm actually glad you asked that, because that has been a whole education in and of itself and become like my other job, bizarrely. But so basically the way that happened, oh my God, TikTok, where's Jamie? Jamie, my neighbor, I was like, how do I do TikTok? What do your kids do? What I realized after about a year of hearing no from publishers is that I read these stories of people that made a book trailer. They went viral, and all of a sudden all the publishing houses were lining up for them. And I thought, well, the ballet community is alive and well on social media. It is like a whole other universe. And so I made this trailer for the book. And then I asked a lot of my very famous dance friends if they would share the trailer that have very big platforms who dance in big companies. And so they did. And I didn't get an agent or a publishing deal out of it, but I did get a lot of very interesting contacts in response that led to a lot of other creative thinking, let's just say. Including that I have this adult student who is actually a huge influencer on social media. I don't think she's here today, but Kristen, she's the Mochi Mommy. Follow her. She really has this fabulous content. But she's been in my class for years. I have all these amazing adult students who I know they're dancing so well, and they're off living their secret lives, doing incredible things, and I didn't even know. But she came to me and she said, I saw your trailer. Let's build your Instagram account. So she started filming me doing these little ballet tips. And this is, I won't tell the story forever, but anyway, I went viral pretty fast, let's just say, in a scary way. And also I think for the ballet world, this was very scary because the ballet world is traditionally closed. It's true. Like publishing, we don't talk about what goes on behind closed doors. People are very careful about what they say and do, and this felt out of anyone's control. I'm very fortunate that I have an amazing boss at P&B who discussed this with me and how to manage it and said, I think people really appreciate what you're doing, so keep going. With a few modifications, right? And it kind of opened this whole world to me of connection that even really didn't have anything to do with the writing or the teaching exactly, but it made me realize how many people feel connected through dance. And we have never communicated with each other, or even when we were in companies, we were siloed. I knew the dancers in Miami City Ballet, and I knew a few dancers that I trained with. But now you see on social media, all these dancers are coming and following, like there's like a whole world going on. And so yeah, I kind of had to figure out TikTok. And then, especially once I realized that I was gonna be publishing this myself, that is a vehicle now that sells books. Book Talk is a huge thing. I won't say I've cracked Book Talk yet. But Ballet Talk is a thing. There are not a lot of ballet books on Ballet Talk. And it's actually something I've just, as a publisher, tried to flex my muscle at a little bit and learn that skill because it's a whole other skill. And now I have people come to my open class who say, oh, I saw your TikTok, and I felt too scared to go to P&B before, but once I saw you on TikTok, I thought you seemed really nice, and so I thought I would come and try your class. And that made me so happy because I do understand feeling intimidated. I do think that's one of ballet's problems. It can be one of publishing's problems, that it feels very much scary, or like the people who are inside of it are scary. We're a little scary, but we're not scary. And so, thank you. That's a whole other conversation. Anyone has questions for me, I'm figuring it out too, but like Naomi said at the beginning, I try very hard just to really just be, there's been enough in my life that I don't feel the need to pretend anything. I am who I am, whether I'm teaching, whether I'm, hanging out with my kids or whatever, and that's just what I do on social media too. And if people don't like it, then they can not follow, and if they do, come on in. Let's feel connected, especially after COVID. I feel like that has felt really, really good. Sorry, that was a really long answer. We're doing on time.
Other wonders?
And where else can we find you coming up? What other events?
Oh, thank you, Terrell. By the way, this is actually, everybody say hello to Terrell, who also has learned to get her dance books for young kids out here, the Once Upon a Dance books, and they are wonderful. And I also would not be here without her support and encouragement. And she's also my student. And I'm just very grateful for all of these little connections that got me here. Wednesday, if you're not bored of all my talking already, Wednesday night I will be with Peter Bohl, who's the artistic director of Pacific Northwest Ballet, at Third Place Books, Ravenna, on Wednesday night. And then next Sunday, I'll be over at On Point Bellevue, which is the dance store in Bellevue, with Sarah Gabriel Ryan, who, if you have young dance kids, they will love seeing her because she's the Sugar Plum Fairy, and she's on the cover of my other 2 books, and we'll be talking more ballet stuff there. So, and then I go on tour. I'm going to go to LA and Stanford and Salt Lake City twice, and wherever else, because I just, why not? So, there you go.
Hey, Miriam.
Oh, I think there's,
Is there one over there? Okay.
and then we're done? Are we done?
No,
Oh,
I was gonna ask you.
oh, you were, oh, no, then go, Lori, go.
No, that can go next.
Okay, Miriam.
Can you hear me with the mask on? So I just wanted to ask if you have time to talk a little bit about how you approach writing about movement after having been a dancer. Because when I read your book, it reminded me of reading books at that age when I was a budding ballet dancer. And what I loved to read about in ballet books was when writers were writing about movement, like Gelsey Kirkland's books.
Yes.
I loved it, and I could
Picture it.
sensationalize it. And I think you do that really well. You really articulate the movement really well, and I just think it's it might be interesting as a dancer, like we obsess about movement, we perfect it.